My amendment would ensure that no funds are authorized in this year's NDAA to be used on electric vehicles or electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And none of Americans' hard-earned tax dollars should be used for our military to be forced onto electric vehicles.
We're debating whether or not this should even be an option within the military.
Why in the world would we tie the hands of our military to maintain what they already have? That's just dumb. I don't understand why we're doing it. We shouldn't do it.
Well, that was a small taste of the ongoing debates breaking out in the House of Representatives over amendments to the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act. You know, it's that big military spending bill that's up for renewal every year. And just like last year, House Republicans are using it as an opportunity to condition their support for the bill on various culture war related amendments. You just heard Marjorie Taylor Greene whine about the use of electric vehicles within the military and how she doesn't want any money to go toward those electric vehicles. We'll get back to whether or not her amendment was supported and made part of the final bill, but the legislation, I think, should be talked about in general first, because every year, without fail, the amount of money allocated for the National Defense Authorization Act, the money allocated for our military, increases significantly. So for the year 2025, the price tag for this bill would be $895.3 billion. Meaning we're quickly approaching spending $1 trillion a year on our military, on the Pentagon, which has failed every single audit that has been conducted. Unbelievable. Now, House lawmakers on Wednesday began debating some 350 proposed amendments to the bill, a list narrowed by the Rules Committee from more than 1,350 that were submitted. The process is expected to stretch into Thursday, with a vote on the defense bill likely to occur later this week on Friday. Now, Republicans proposed amendments to the legislation that would do a whole host of things. And look, at the end of the day, this is really just theater, because the House doesn't get to unilaterally decide what this bill looks like. They have to get the Senate to agree with it. And if last year was any example of what's going to happen this year, all these amendments are probably going to get stripped out of the final bill anyway. But nonetheless, what Republicans seek to do is restrict service members' access to abortion and also to some diversity protections. They also want to block future US assistance to Ukraine and Palestinian civilians. So get a load of this. This actually infuriates me the most. So we provide Israel with the bombs to level Gaza, destroy the hospitals, the universities, the schools, the refugee camps, the residential buildings. And then you have Republican lawmakers who have the audacity to essentially say, we're not gonna offer those Palestinian civilians that we're helping to slaughter any help after the war is over. I'm gonna give you more details on that in just a moment, so hold.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth, as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
They also want to increase military presence along the southern border to respond to the migrant crisis. I mean, they could have just, passed immigration reform, but God forbid they do anything useful with their time. They also want to roll back Biden's environmental protections, like funding for those electric vehicles that Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about in that video that we just showed you. Now, House Republicans secured several contentious amendments. So they have already succeeded on some of this stuff, including a measure that was proposed by Representative Chip Roy, who's part of the far-right House Freedom Caucus, to essentially prohibit funds from being used in support of Biden's climate agenda. Amendments led by Representatives Brian Mast and Jody Arrington from Texas would bar US defense funding for building or rebuilding in the war-ravaged Gaza Strip when the war between Israel and Hamas ends, and for transporting Palestinian refugees to the United States. Brian Mast is one of the worst people on the planet. He is a disgusting, reprehensible human being. okay? Just has complete ill will and malice in his heart for innocent civilians who have done nothing to him whatsoever. That's who Brian Mast is. Un-American, wearing the uniform of a foreign government's military in the halls of Congress. It's sick. Now, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Adam Smith, said something that I agree with. He characterized Mast and Arrington's amendments as counterproductive to US and Israeli interests, and called the effort to block Palestinian refugees biased and somewhat bigoted. So we're obviously assisting Israel in their ethnic cleansing. So of the Palestinians who might manage to survive the aerial bombardments that we're aiding and abetting in, what exactly are Palestinians supposed to do? Where are they supposed to go? Like, the US is real good at essentially manufacturing migrant crises and then giving the middle finger, okay, to the refugees who result from the wars that we start or the wars that we aid and take part in. I mean, we did it with Syria as well. We engaged in that proxy war. There's a huge migrant crisis as a result. And then we just give the middle finger to those migrants, to those refugees, to people fleeing from a man who was literally using chemical weapons against his own people. Okay. So look, right now, things don't look so great, but overall, I think even if you have cause for concern, a lot of these amendments that I absolutely hate are probably going to get stripped by the time this bill makes its way to the Senate. Now, other amendments from Republicans didn't even make the cut, so that's good news, including an effort by Andy Biggs to cut US funding for NATO. And just going back to Marjorie Taylor Greene's proposed amendment to ban funding for electric vehicles and related infrastructure, that also did not make it in the final bill, at least for now. There are some areas of agreement, though, between both parties, and I think that this should come as no surprise to you. But nonetheless, I'll tell you what the details are. Republicans and Democrats on the Armed Services Committee said the legislation approved by their panel authorizes broad and badly needed improvements to service members' pay and benefits, including a 19.5% raise for junior enlisted personnel and expanded childcare access, plus improvements to dilapidated military housing and other infrastructure around the world. I apologize. That's actually not something that I was unsurprised by. I was very surprised by that. I was very surprised that there's a rare instance where you have both parties agreeing that maybe some of this money should go toward improving the lives of our service members, because usually they're the ones who are neglected while the bulk of the money goes to private defense contractors and a whole host of other moneyed interests that are involved in this military industrial complex. So this is actually a good thing that both parties seem to agree on. And I really do hope they pass that, because our service members deserve way better. But not all agreement is good, because both parties also agree with increasing funding for our ongoing arms race with China. There could also be increased aid to Israel included in this bill as well, which would not surprise me. Now, Republicans control the House by a thin margin, 218 to Democrats 213. And while House Speaker Mike Johnson was willing to work with Democrats in order to secure military funding for Ukraine and Israel, there's really no indication that he's willing to work with Democrats this time around. But again, in the end, all of these amendments might get stripped away, especially if you look at last year as a good example. So the radically different House and Senate bills that emerged following the amendments process last year made for a tense, lengthy negotiation and ultimately delivered an embarrassing defeat to House Republicans when they were forced to accept a final bill largely stripped of most contentious provisions. So we don't really know what the final bill is going to look like just yet. And House Republicans are probably just engaging in this process for what they do best, political theater. But the final thing I'll say about this is we spend way too much on the Pentagon. And I don't say that because I think we're wasting money on national security. I say that because we are spending too much money in the wrong places. And I think we could save money if we stop doing all sorts of sweetheart deals and government grants with some of these military contractors. And so the only bright spot that I saw in these amendments and these proposals is the fact that they're looking to improve conditions for armed services for our service members. Other than that, it looks like a giant smorgasbord of nonsense culture war amendments that have been proposed. And I guess they're having a lot of fun debating those amendments that might not go anywhere anyway.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.